It's time to eat.
Get in my belly!
Sit down and get ready to consume an abundance of fantasy football knowledge from Ross Tucker and Evan Silva.
Me so hungry.
On the Fantasy Feast Eatin podcast.
Yeah, let's eat, baby. It is week number 9 in the NFL, and we've got some trade deadline moves that we need to sort out with the man, Evan Silva from rotoworld.com. We are presented by betonline.ag, the online gaming website of choice for the Fantasy Feast podcast. Best odds, fastest payout. Speaking of fast, if you want to get a fast free Madden, ShipStation is the way to do it. Just go to rosstucker.com and get the free trial at ShipStation. Email that to me, and you might win this week's free Madden hard copy or code. Evan, a lot to get to. Jay Ajayi, Kelvin Benjamin, Jimmy G. There's going to be a lot to dive into. Of course, hopefully most of you are already following Evan on Twitter. He's at Evan Silva. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL, former offensive lineman. You can check me out, Twitter or Instagram, Facebook.com/Ross Tucker NFL. We've also got the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. If you like making games interesting, you can check out the Even Money Podcast, College Draft, to start to learn about the top college prospects for those of you that play a lot of dynasty leagues for fantasy. Anyway, make sure you take all of the knowledge that you're about to get dumped on you by Evan and use it on the Draft app. If you haven't tried it yet, you're definitely missing out. It's 1 week fantasy, daily fantasy, whatever you call it, but it's a snake draft. It's under 5 minutes, and you can play for week 9 starting right now. You're playing for cold hard cash. Your chance of winning 80% better than on the salary cap sites. All new players get a free entry into a real money draft when you make your first deposit. All you have to do is use the promo code FEAST. Again, you can play a real money game for free just by using the promo code FEAST. Gets even better, by the way. Draft.com is so sure you'll love it. They're even offering Fantasy Feast listeners a money-back guarantee up to $100. Just search Draft in your app store or go to draft.com and come play free right now with promo code FEAST. All right, Evan, we mentioned it. There's some trades we have to talk about. Let's start with the Thursday nighter. It's Bills, it's Jets, and you can just talk about Kelvin Benjamin both for Thursday night game, which is short notice for him, but also moving forward.
Yeah, not a good trade for his fantasy value. The Panthers throw the ball 5 or 6 times more per game than the Bills do. The Bills are the run heaviest team in the league, essentially, to this point. And we oftentimes see how wide receivers who change teams in free agency really struggle, especially in their first years with their new team. Now to put onto Kelvin Benjamin's plate, having to learn an entirely different offense and gel with a quarterback who, number one, doesn't throw the ball very often. Number two, prefers to throw the ball to receivers who create separation, and no receiver in the league creates less separation than Kelvin Benjamin. I think this could be a disastrous trade for Kelvin Benjamin's fantasy value. I think it can be a good deal maybe in real life if he just scores a couple of touchdowns, in the second half of the year, and or gives the Bills just another threat, that they needed in their offense. I mean, last week they're running out Andre Holmes. He's their leading receiver. So I think that Kelvin Benjamin is an upgrade on Andre Holmes, but I would be worried about his fantasy value both in the short term and in the long term. I have him in a couple of redraft leagues, and I will not be starting him on Thursday night. I'm probably going to play Larry Fitzgerald with Drew Stanton at quarterback over him. With all that said, I do like the move for Tyrod Taylor. If Kelvin Benjamin can just increase his touchdown percentage, his number of touchdowns thrown divided by pass attempts in the second half of the year, then it's good news for Tyrod. And Tyrod Taylor has been a top 10 fantasy quarterback in back-to-back weeks. Nothing to really fear about the Jets' pass defense, which may be without Morris Claiborne. LaShawn McCoy has been a machine, and he has also led the Bills in catches in each of their 2 games since the bye. The Jets have given up the 5th most receiving yards in the league to opposing RBs, and it looks like they are going to be without Muhammad Wilkerson. Nothing we can really do at this point in the Bills' receiver core. Kelvin Benjamin, I think, will probably play. Don't know how much he'll play. Maybe only in red zone sets. We'll see. Maybe they'll try to throw him a fade toward the end zone. But, him having an actually big game seems really, really unlikely. On the other side, Josh McCown is a guy that is in serious fantasy contention as a starter every single week. I mean, there are a couple leagues where I have him, and I've just been starting him every week, and he's getting very good production. He's been a top 15 fantasy quarterback in 5 of his last 7 games, and he's been a top 8 fantasy quarterback in 3 straight. The Bills, I would say, are a below-average pass defense. I'm sorry, a below-average matchup for opposing quarterbacks. But they've also given up over 300 passing yards in each of the last 3 weeks to Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston, Derek Carr. They have given up the second fewest touchdown passes in the league. But McCown, I think, is playing well enough at this point that he is in that top 15 mix for sure. The backfield has been kind of narrowed down to a 2-man committee between Matt Forte and Bilal Powell. Elijah McGuire has taken a back seat. Last week, Bilal Powell and Matt Forte both played the same exact number of snaps. Bilal Powell had 17 touches. Matt Forte had 10 touches. I think that they're about on equal footing, but if I was going to side with someone this week, it would be Bilal Powell, a little bit younger, a little bit fresher legs, not on the injury report. These teams are on a short week. So I think that Bilal Powell is an okay play. I own him in a couple of leagues, and I don't know. He will be a guy that I probably decide whether or not to play him at the last minute. He's like a fringe flex play. I think that Austin Safarian Jenkins gets back on track in this game. The Bills, they got shredded by the Bucs tight ends a couple of weeks ago. O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate. O.J. Howard had a monster game. Cameron Brate had a solid game. And then last week, Jared Cook was very productive against the Bills as well. Austin Safarian Jenkins, although his touchdown streak ended last week, he did play a season-high 90% of the snaps, ran 34 routes, his second most of the year. So I think he gets back on track. I think that this is an underrated game, and I think that it should be a fun one. We've had a bunch of great Thursday night games, with the exception of last week this year, and I think that this will be another one. Should mention Robbie Anderson. He has gone over 50 yards 4 times since week 2, and if you're looking at a Jets receiver, he is typically the best bet. He does have a difficult matchup this week, though. I think that we're going to see Tre'Davious White, the Bills' impressive rookie cornerback, match up with Robbie Anderson often, and Tre'Davious White essentially shut down Amari Cooper last week. He is the number 5 overall cornerback in Pro Football Focus's grades among 114, and we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, I did the Jets-Falcons, Evan. I would just say very impressed by Robbie Anderson. He dusted Desmond Trufant for a touchdown. I mean, he can really run. It's amazing to me that guy wasn't drafted. With his ability to take the top off the defense. I mean, guys are straight up scared of him. It's crazy. The next game, it's Atlanta, Carolina. How convenient. We're just talking about Trufant. We're just talking about Kelvin Benjamin. What's the fallout in Carolina from the Benjamin trade from a fantasy perspective?
So it is really going to elevate Devin Funchess, at least in the short term, until Greg Olsen comes back. Greg Olsen is due back. I believe their bye is in week 11, and Greg Olsen is due back in week 12. So for the next, we're in week 9, then week 10. Yeah, so for the next 2 games, this puts Devin Funchess in a very good position in terms of volume. I also think that the move could wind up benefiting Christian McCaffrey, because Christian McCaffrey has been running on about 30% of his plays. He's been being used as a wide receiver, and I think that we could see him, his number of wide receiver routes improve this week. So he is squarely in play this week, in particular as a DraftKings play, and he also leads the Panthers in red zone targets. So I wouldn't rule out a touchdown, and the matchup is very good against a Falcons defense that has allowed the fourth most catches to opposing running backs. So I really like Christian McCaffrey this week. He is not usually a guy that I've, gone out of my way to be like, I really, really like him this week, but this is a really good week for him. And I also think that Funchess, especially on DFS sites, his price obviously has not been adjusted since the trade, because they don't operate like that. So you are getting him at a discount relative to the movement that has occurred since those prices were set. So that puts him in a good position. I think that Cam can have a good game here. He's been very, very up and down. I mean, we can't consider him anything other than a boom or bust guy at this point. But, if you take a step back at the last 2 weeks, they played at Soldier Field and at Raymond James Stadium in one of the windiest games of the entire season so far. Dirk Cutter, after the game, actually described it, or said it was one of the windiest games that he has ever coached. So I think that Cam Newton can bounce back with a good game here. He actually had his 2015 NFL MVP season after Kelvin Benjamin tore his ACL in the preseason that year. Now that a lot of things went right for that team. Ted Ginn scored 10 touchdowns, etc. But pulling Kelvin Benjamin out of the offense, I don't think necessarily takes a lot away from Cam. I think that they're going to be all right. They know Kelvin Benjamin better than anyone. The Panthers are a good team this year, and they're certainly in playoff contention. And I don't think that they would make this trade if they thought that Kelvin Benjamin was like a true difference maker for their offense. So Curtis Samuel is a guy that I will be keeping track of a little bit, just to see where his usage is this week, and then maybe we can address him as a fantasy option the following week. And I think that he is a candidate to play more. Jonathan Stewart is touchdown or bust. Cameron Artis-Payne got more involved last week. The Panthers really like him in blitz protection. He is not, a fantasy option, but when you involve another back, it starts to take away usage from other backs, and Jonathan Stewart there lost some usage. So, and then on the other side, this is a tough matchup for the Falcons. Only 2 of 7 quarterbacks to go up against the Panthers have been top 12 finishers on the week. That was Tom Brady and Carson Wentz. They tend to finish top 12 against everyone. While Matt Ryan has been a top 12 fantasy quarterback in just 1 of 7 starts. The Falcons rank number 2 in the NFL in yards per play and number 5 in yards per game, but they have struggled in the red zone. Their defense is not winning battles, so their offensive play volume has been way down, and the Falcons' defense is on the field a ton. So all the games that they are playing are just far lower scoring than last year. So and we're 8 weeks into this, and clearly expectations need to be lowered. It's not an explosive offense right now. And really the offenses that Matt Ryan has quarterbacked throughout his career, with the exception of last season, they've never been particularly explosive. So it was a great year last year, but it's not back to reality now. And their offense is still fine, but they're not scoring nearly as many points as they did last year, obviously. Last week, Devonta Freeman was out-touched by Tevin Coleman, but Devonta Freeman had a little little shoulder injury, and he still out-snapped Tevin Freeman 60 to 40%. This is not a good matchup for running backs in general, facing the Panthers in Carolina. But I think that Devontae Freeman will be fine in terms of his usage. Julio Jones is going to get the James Bradberry treatment. James Bradberry won his battles last week against Mike Evans, held Mike Evans to 5 catches for 60, no touchdowns. Last week, James Bradberry is very, very good. Got to lower expectations for pretty much all the guys in this Falcons offense. The one guy that does stand out to me as a particularly good play this week is Mohamed Sanu. Mohamed Sanu, under the new OC, Steve Sarkisian, Mohamed Sanu has been much more of a focal point in the Falcons offense. He's going to get a good matchup against Captain Munnerlyn, who has struggled this year. Austin Hooper had a very good game against the Jets last week. I streamed him, but I am not going to stream him again. Panthers have allowed the 6th fewest catches and 6th fewest yards to tight ends this year, and we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, I'll be curious, by the way, to see, Marty Herney told – you might have retweeted that, Evan, that Marty Herney told Bill Vaught that they wanted to get more speed on the field with the Benjamin trade.
Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, we'll see. Curtis Samuel, Russell Shepard, we'll see. Let's get to Indianapolis and Houston. How about Houston, man? I mean, I see people that every time Will Fuller scores a touchdown, it's funny because it's like, well, he can't keep this up. He can't keep this up. Where do you stand on that?
I get what they're saying, but in an offense that, like, you have to understand that this is now a shootout offense. Their defense isn't good. They lost, a bunch of players on defense, and their offense is functioning at an extremely efficient level. And Will Fuller, so I think it maybe made more sense initially to say that Will Fuller, regression would hit him. However, as he has played well, he has also played more. So he's now getting more opportunities. And he's not a guy that you want to bet against. I mean, he is a really, really good player. I think people that watched him at Notre Dame, I know there was a lot of hand-wringing about his hands, and he will always probably have drop issues because he has, naturally small hands. He has 8 1/4-inch hands. But he's really, really good. And now he's developed this instant rapport with Deshaun Watson, which is so impressive. He came off he broke his collarbone in the preseason. But you just keep starting him. I mean, I was not high on him last week against Seattle. And I thought that made sense. But, I mean, you're starting him against the Colts. That's the bottom line. He's a great play in season-long and daily fantasy. DeAndre Hopkins is the best wide receiver play on the board this week. Deshaun Watson is the best quarterback play on the board this week. I think that Lamar Miller could get a little bit overlooked. He dominated usage last week. So Dante Foreman did not show up on Friday to practice, and he got demoted to 3rd string. He was behind Alfred Blue. But the main beneficiary from that was Lamar Miller, who played 87% of the snaps, 24 touches. I mean, those are not usage numbers that he had been getting regularly. And he obviously is a guy who benefits significantly from the advancement, the rapid progression of this offense. And I think that he could be a guy who goes a little bit overlooked in daily fantasy this week as an awesome play against the Colts. He ripped them up twice last season at his 2 best games against them. Talk about the Colts. I think that this is a good game for the Colts too. So there's a big total on this game, and there's been money that has come in on the over. And so those, I like to try to target those types of games. I mean, the Texans were in a game like that last week against Seattle. And, that certainly paid dividends if you were starting guys in that game. So I like Jacoby Brissett this week against the Texans as a streamer. He's been a top 14 quarterback in 4 of his last 6 starts. The Texans, as we've mentioned, they are depleted on defense. You don't have to worry about the weather in this game. It'll be underneath the NRG Stadium dome in Houston. The Texans just got smashed by Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson and Jacoby Brissett played different games, so I don't know if that's translatable, but a lot of fantasy points given up. And then the Texans have also allowed the 6th most rushing yards to quarterbacks, while Jacoby Brissett is 6th at his position in rushing attempts and tied for 1st in touchdowns. He's been a very matchup-sensitive quarterback this year. He's had good games against the Browns, the 49ers, and then when he's played better defenses in bad spots, he's had legitimately bad games against Jacksonville, Seattle. I didn't think he played terrible in that game, but he wasn't good in fantasy. But I think that he can pop up and have a good week. I like playing him with T.Y. Hilton, which T.Y. Hilton has been, super, super up and down. But he has a great history against the Texans. You get to play him indoors where he has awesome historical splits. And his price is ridiculous right now in daily fantasy on pretty much every site. T.Y. Hilton, I think it's a good week to pivot onto him. We saw what the Seahawks perimeter speedster wide receivers, Paul Richardson and Tyler Lockett, they were both able to do against this Texans defense last week. Jack Doyle, stud. He is Jacoby Brissett's go-to, possession receiver. He's, the go-to guy in the red zone. The Texans have given up big games to good tight ends that they face: Travis Kelce, Gronk, Jimmy Graham. So keep riding with him. Got nothing, no love for Moncrief or any of the other complimentary pass catchers. Should be noted, Marlon Mack outsnapped Frank Gore for the 2nd week in a row last week. Still not really, loving this backfield for the Colts. The Texans, if they've done anything well, they've continued to play a very good run defense, holding opposing running back to 3.36 yards per carry, only 1 rushing score allowed through 7 games. And we can move on to the next one.
Cincinnati at Jacksonville. That's where I will be, Evan. Why don't you start with the Bengals?
Nice. I kind of think the Bengals are going to get their butts kicked in this one. Really like the Jaguars' defense this week. I mean, last week, we know the Bengals have O-line issues, and even against the Colts, the pass protection as a unit is bad enough right now that it will bring your struggling pass rush to life. And now they're going on the road to Jacksonville, to face the best pass rush in football right now. The Jaguars rank 1st in the NFL in sacks and 1st in the NFL in quarterback hits. And, now they're fresh coming off the bye. So I think this is going to be a long day for Andy Dalton. I think that Leonard Fournette plus the Jaguars defense in daily fantasy correlation, I think that correlates very, very well. I think that they can both have big games here. The Bengals have played good run defense so far, but Leonard Fournette can rip long runs. He should be healthy coming off the bye after dealing with that ankle injury. I think he's been catching more passes, been using the passing game more than I think people realize. And he scored a touchdown every game this year. He's gone over 120 total yards in 4 of 6 games. So love Leonard Fournette. Not a lot of love for the Jaguars pass catchers, of course. But I would say keep an eye on Day Westbrook, the Jaguars' 4th-round rookie. This guy was sensational in the preseason, won the Biletnikoff Award, was actually the Heisman Trophy runner-up this past year, I believe. Or he at least he was invited to the Heisman ceremony. He was a top 5 guy, which I believe was won by Deshaun Watson. Forgive me for my limited college football awards.
No, it was Lamar Jackson. Watson got 2nd. I think Westbrook was 4th or 5th, but that's okay.
That's all we need. Perfect. Great job, Ross. So don't want any part of Dalton. Worried about A.J. Green. Joe Mixon, I think, has a shot, but even last week he only had 14 touches. Only reason that he sort of paid dividends as a fantasy play was because of that one long screen pass, 67 yards, got it down to the one. But I'm concerned about him. I'm just concerned about the entirety of this Bengals offense in a game like this. Tyler Kroft is a touchdown or bust streamer, not a big yardage guy. I guess we should discuss John Ross. So there were reports that John Ross was going to play a quote-unquote extensive role in last week's game against the Colts, and he plays 6 snaps. So, yeah, that's where we are. He's a rookie, and that's just where we are. We can move on to the next game.
All right. How about Tampa Bay and New Orleans? The hot seat is already burning for Dirk Cutter. John Gruden is the popular name that you're hearing down there. What do you got on the Bucs?
Yeah, that's wild. I think Florio was talking about that. Multiple people have been talking about it. That's interesting. I can't. It's hard to talk about the Bucs right now because we don't even know if Jameis Winston is going to play. We do this on Wednesday morning. We don't have any information right now. See, I thought that Jameis was going to be okay. He played really well, maybe his best game of the season in Week 7 at Buffalo, which is, of course, a difficult place to play, playing through that AC joint sprain in his throwing shoulder. And then last week, Dirk Cutter admitted that he considered pulling Jameis during the game. He took a hit around the shoulder area, and he didn't think that he was healthy. And Jameis, his health is a legitimate concern. This is to his throwing shoulder. He's a quarterback. So, I don't know. We're going to have to wait until later in the week to get information about him and about the Bucs as an offense. If Ryan Fitzpatrick comes in, though, I should say, I think that he becomes an interesting streamer at the Saints. He came off the bench against the Cardinals a few weeks ago, and he was a top 3 fantasy quarterback on the week. Your Ivy League buddy. On the Saints side, so Mark Ingram lost 2 fumbles in the fourth quarter last week against the Bears, and there's going to be some concern this week, I think, that he could lose playing time. However, I don't think that they are going to go away from him. Players make mistakes sometimes. This actually happened to Mark Ingram last year at almost the exact same time of year. It was right around Halloween. He was playing in a game against Seattle, lost a fumble for the second straight week, rode the bench the rest of the game. Guess what he did in the next game? Went nuts against the 49ers, and he was very, very low ownership in daily fantasy that week because people were frightened that he had gotten benched. So I'm sticking with him against the Buccaneers. I'm also sticking with Alvin Kamara. We saw him score a touchdown last week. Finally, 11 touches for 76 yards against the Bears. And I think that he's always going to be in that 11 to 15 touch range. He may see a little bit more this week, but I think that he is a very, very good play against the Buccaneers. If Drew Brees and Michael Thomas are ever going to have a blow-up week, this would be the week. The Buccaneers are last in the NFL in sacks, last in quarterback hits. Don't get any pressure on the quarterback. They're going to be without Brent Grimes again, their top corner, and they're giving up the 3rd most passing yards, 8th most passing touchdowns per game. So I think that this is a good week with people have been frustrated in fantasy with Drew Brees and Michael Thomas because they've been like floor plays and not upside plays. But I think that if they are going to have an upside game, this would be it. Willie Snead is not involved in the offense right now. 77% of the snaps last week. Brandon Coleman was the Saints' full-time slot receiver. He played 80%. That doesn't mean that Brandon Coleman has been good in fantasy, though. I mean, he's not getting very many targets. Ted Ginn, we always know the story with Ted Ginn. He's not going to get games where he has like 10 targets, but he does have huge big playability, and he's volatile. And so he didn't have a good fantasy game last week, but he did make a great play in double coverage on a 53-yard bomb. And so I mean they're going to keep throwing it to him each week, and this is a great matchup for Ted Ginn to spike back up. And I think that pretty much. Kobe Fleener, don't stream him. He has played 25%, 26%, and 26% of the Saints snaps since their bye. So he is not an option right now.
All right, we got the Rams and the Giants. The Giants will be without Janoris Jenkins, who's been suspended indefinitely, as the Giants continue to have discipline problems in their secondary.
Yeah, and that helps Jared Goff a little bit. And I think it's also worth noting that the Giants have given up top 12 fantasy quarterback finishes to 5 of 7 quarterbacks that they faced, including Jameis Winston, Phillip Rivers, Trevor Siemian, and Russell Wilson, all in a row before their bye. And also, I've been reading about Olivier Vernon and B.J. Goodson, and it sounds like even though they are coming off the bye, these guys are not necessarily going to be healthy. Olivier Vernon has been out for a while. B.J. Goodson has been in and out, seemingly like re-aggravating his ankle problem. So Jared Goff is going to face this defense at significantly less than full strength again. So I think that Jared Goff is an okay, not great streamer this week. Todd Gurley, obviously the best play in the game. The Giants' run defense has disappointed this year. Todd Gurley's averaging almost 25 touches for over 131 total yards per game, 8 touchdowns in 7 games. He should be in a good position here. No Janoris Jenkins does help the outlooks for the Rams receivers. However, we're always in this situation with the Rams receivers where no one gets a lot of targets because they're throwing the ball so many different ways. It's very similar to the Redskins situation. And they have a running back who gets a lot of targets, and then they have a bunch of different guys. They play 2 tight ends. They play Tyler Higbee. They play Gerald Everett. They play, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Sammy Watkins, Tavon Austin. There will be some games where Pharaoh Cooper will be involved. So that means that, they're difficult to predict, and they're not really, super matchup sensitive. So you're just kind of on your own with them. Tyler Higbee is mildly interesting just because the Giants get smashed by tight ends so consistently. However, Tyler Higbee has gone over 3 targets in only 2 of 7 games this year. So, he's a totally matchup-driven streamer play this week, but he also has a low floor. On the other side, I just would rather play the Rams defense than mess around with Eli Manning. Sterling Shepard is he was in some of the stories that I was reading about the health of the Giants, and it didn't seem like he was 100% back yet either. Now, we will find out more about Sterling Shepard when the injury reports come out. We do this on Wednesday mornings, but I want to see it from Sterling Shepard before I use him in any form of fantasy. And it does set up well for him because they have so little at wide receiver right now. So I could definitely see him having some, good games in the second half of the year. But he has battled ankle problems since training camp. And I want to put him in prove it mode, see that he is able to handle a lot of playing time. I don't want to get into a situation where, he aggravates the injury. He's out there playing at less than 100%. The matchup isn't good either. against the Rams. The Rams have shut down slot receivers all season long. The play here is and will remain Evan Ingram every single week. The Rams have actually allowed the second fewest fantasy points to tight ends, but I don't even think it matters. I mean, Evan Ingram is real good. He's the new healthy Jordan Reed. He is 5th among tight ends in targets, 8th in yards, 7th in touchdowns. Should talk about the running backs. Orleans Darkwa and Wayne Gallman. Even after that big game that Orleans Darkwa had in Denver, he was pushed back into a committee with Wayne Gallman. They played the same number of snaps in that pre-bye loss to Seattle, and Shane Vereen was involved as well. The Rams' run defense is not very good. That's their weakness on defense. However, we have very unreliable workloads in the Giants' backfield, and therefore, Orleans Darkwa, I mean, he's the best play out of the bunch, but he's not a very good play, and we can move on to the next one.
All right, we are getting down to the end here of the 1 o'clock games. How about the Broncos and the Eagles? Eagles involved in a trade we need to talk about, and that is for Jay Ajayi. Why don't you start with the Birds and what the Jay Ajayi trade means? Yeah,
I think that the Eagles, so Howie Roseman, he comes out and says, LeGarrette Blount is still our starter. Guys in the front office or the coaching staff say things like this, I think, to kind of try to maintain a sort of even keel in the locker room and things like that. I don't think that the Eagles trade a 4th-round pick for Ajayi during the season in order for him to be anything less than their eventual feature back. Will that happen this week? No. I think that this is a wait-and-see week for the Eagles' backfield in general because they're playing the friggin' Broncos, who are the best run defense in the league, shut down everyone, held Kareem Hunt last week to 46 yards on 22 carries, shut down Zeke, shut down Shady, shut down Melvin Gordon twice. So, it's a week for us to kind of sit back and learn and avoid the situation. But I think that for certain, Jay Ajayi will eventually be at worst their lead back and be a guy that we can lean on in a high-scoring offense for 14 to 18, maybe even 19 or 20 touches a game in due time. Can't imagine using any of these guys this week, though. I think that Zach Ertz is going to go off because that's what tight ends do against the Broncos. The Broncos play very stingy man coverage defense against wide receivers, and tight ends can really, really hurt them. We saw Travis Kelce do it. Jason Witten had a big game against him, Evan Ingram. So I think that Ertz, who has been he hasn't had the big volume games as much recently, but he's been just scoring a ton of touchdowns. I think he has another big volume game here. And I think that Carson Wentz, matching up with the Broncos is never ideal. It's never optimal, but I would stick with them. So the Broncos, they give up a lot of rushing yards to quarterbacks, and Carson Wentz has the 3rd most rushing yards among all quarterbacks. The Broncos pass rush has been a major disappointment this year. They have the 2nd fewest quarterback hits in the league, and they're right middle of the pack in the league in sacks. The Eagles are going to have to figure out ways to help the left tackle Vaitai that they have in there right now, and hopefully they can get that figured out. But I think it gives us some optimism on Carson Wentz that the Broncos have not fully that their pass rush has been a disappointment so far this year. Concerned about Alshon Jeffrey. He'll take on Bradley Roby and Aqib Talib, and both of those guys are really good. Aguilar in the slot, he finally slowed down last week. He just hasn't been getting a lot of volume, and now he's going to have to deal with a lot of Chris Harris. That's certainly concerning. And then I think it should be noted that Torrey Smith starting to lose snaps to the impressive rookie Matt Collins. He was a stud in the preseason. and he showed them some big play ability, played a season-high 26% of the snaps last week. I think that Matt Collins is the future in that, that big play role, and hopefully we will start to see him play more. A guy to definitely roster in dynasty leagues, and if you play like in a 16-team league, I don't think it's crazy to put Matt Collins on your bench. On the other side, are we going to get Osweiler?
We don't know. It seems like they're going to make a change. It won't be Paxton Lynch. My guess is it will be Osweiler. By the way, usually Von Miller rushes from the right side. We'll see. Maybe they'll move him around a little bit more. I thought Vaitai did a lot of positive things. I watched the entire Eagles. He got beat for 1 sack, but other than that, he did a lot of really good things, and they were not helping him any extra at all. So I thought that was something to note. But for the Broncos, I would operate – we don't know, but I would operate discussing them that it will be Osweiler. That would be my guess. They don't usually talk this much about evaluating the quarterback position and not make a change.
Yeah, it's just gross. It doesn't matter, I guess, even really who's in there. As you said, it's not going to be Paxton Lynch. He hasn't even practiced, really. He suffered a shoulder injury in the preseason. He's terrible anyways. Trevor Siemian that's frustrating to see, a guy just lose his confidence like that. He just lost it. He is it went downhill very fast for him. And now we're to the point where we're talking about Osweiler. It's Eagles defense here. I don't know, You're on your own, like trying to start these Broncos pass catchers with friggin' Brock Osweiler in there. He's awful. The running backs, we've been talking about it for several weeks now. It's a 3-man committee in the backfield, and it's just they're in a bad spot right now, man. They need to go get Brian Hoyer or something. They should have traded for Josh McCown last year, like we told them to, right?
Should have done something, man. It's a shame because they got a good team other than that. Let's move on to the last game here for part one. It's the Ravens and the Titans. It's a 1 o'clock game in Tennessee.
Yeah, so it looks like Joe Flacco is going to play. Very, very positive for him. That hit, man, was scary. His ear welled up with blood. It turned out it was only a scrape. So that's good. But that's scary to see any individual on the ground like in that posture that he was. But it seems like he was able to bounce back quickly, and it sounds like the Ravens expect him to start. He was playing his best game of the season before he got hurt against the Dolphins. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to go to Tennessee and light it up, but I think that in a week with 6 teams on bye, we can sort of discuss him as a lower end, sort of desperation streamer this week. And I think he's a starter in 2 quarterback leagues against a pretty weak Titans pass defense. Jeremy Maclin, when he's been in there, he's been all right this year. It's just, the passing game hasn't been super functional, and he's been hurt a lot. So I think that I own him in a couple leagues, and he's someone that I'll be weighing this week versus a guy like Bilal Powell. And depending on whether it's PPR or non-PPR, that can help change the tide. But he's like in that flex range where you're considering starting him in a week with 6 teams on bye. Ben Watson scored a touchdown against the Dolphins, and the Titans have been average. Or a little bit better than average against tight ends, but Ben Watson, this Ravens pass catcher core should be at or near full strength. I think Mike Wallace should be back. We got Maclin back last week. The extra long rest after the Thursday game for Ben Watson, who's had some problems with his knees, and so I mean, this is about as healthy as we're going to get this passing game for the Ravens, and the matchup is good for them. At running back, Alex Collins really ran away with it in that last game against the Dolphins. He was fantastic, and he really has been fantastic all year. It's just that the Ravens had not begun giving him a lot of work. And then we saw them use him in the passing game a little bit against the Dolphins, and that was very promising. So Titans have a pretty good run defense, but Alex Collins, I think, is finally to the point where we can consider him like he's a fantasy starter right now. He still has no touchdowns on the year, and they're still giving Buck Allen goal line carries over him. I mean, they lined up Buck Allen a couple times at fullback in that Thursday night game, and he was unable to execute. But I think that Alex Collins is good to go as a starter. Buck Allen, again, fringe flex play right now with Alex Collins moving to the forefront. Terrence West is due back at some point, and then so is Danny Woodhead. Danny Woodhead is due back in Week 11. So the window may be closing for Buck Allen, and I think that he is on the borderline as a flex play against the Titans. On the other side, man, it would have been nice if DeMarco Murray would have been traded to like the Cowboys or something, and then we would have had two more stud running backs to choose from each week. Instead, DeMarco Murray stays put, and it's going to be a committee with Derrick Henry and DeMarco Murray. The fact that the Titans were reportedly trying to dangle DeMarco Murray does, continue to suggest that Derrick Henry is not going away, and this will be an almost 50% split. The lean, of course, has been a little bit toward DeMarco Murray, but they're going to continue to use this committee backfield. I guess I don't think it's optimal for them. I think they need to pick one. I think that even for the construct of their offense, DeMarco Murray is probably that guy because he does so much more in the passing game. But this is where we are. This is the way that they have decided to play. Marcus Mariota is a concerning play this week. He has not been good. I mean, he has not taken the step forward that we expected. I think he's looked uncomfortable for most of the year. He is not really capitalizing as a rusher. He's 10th among quarterbacks in rushing yards. Only one of 8 quarterbacks to face the Ravens have finished better than the quarterback 18 on the week. Mariota has thrown for 300 yards twice in his last 27 starts. He has thrown multiple touchdown passes once in his last 9 games. So, whether it be due to health or maybe he's just not as good as we thought, he has not taken the step forward that I certainly anticipated. I think it is a wait-and-see week for the Titans receiver core. Corey Davis is due back. They play 2 tight end sets a lot. This is going to be and it's a bad matchup, and we have major usage concerns across the board. Should note that Delaney Walker was unable to practice on the Monday coming out of the bye, and if he does not go, then we will get Jonnu Smith in a near full-time role. Jonnu Smith, the athletic rookie out of FIU, I believe, Florida International. He's already playing over half of the Titans' offensive snaps. So he has earned a very big role as a rookie, and he could potentially get the start if there's no Delaney Walker this week. Now, the Titans have allowed players, to play hurt, and these guys want to play hurt. I mean, there's a lot of, incentives that they can hit. They grew up playing this sport, and I mean, they're not on NFL teams to sit out. They want to play. So, and we've seen that with Delaney Walker, and we've seen that with DeMarco Murray, of course, in multiple games this year. So if Delaney says I'm good to go, he's probably going to be out there. So I would say the odds still are probably pretty slim that we get Jonnu Smith as a starter, but something to note anyway, and we can move on to the next one.
Great stuff as always, Evan. I love it. I love your knowledge, dropping it almost as much as I love free stuff, which is what you get from Gamefly. If you go to gamefly.com/Eatin, they let you check out 2 games and or movies for free at a time with a free 30-day premium trial. So you get 30 days for free. So you can binge play a game for 3 days, send it back, binge play a game for 3 days, send it back. I mean, you could play a bunch of games during that 30-day period and find out what you like, what you don't like. Nah, I don't really need to buy that one. Yeah, I would want to buy that one. It's pretty awesome, actually. Premium trial can only be gotten by going to gamefly.com/Eatin. Just go there just because that's awesome. Gamefly.com/Eatin. EATIN. No G. Evan came up with this. That'll do it, by the way, for part 1 of the Fantasy Feast podcast. We will be recording part 2 right now, though, and it'll be on your apps shortly after midnight, so you can all listen to it on your morning commute, afternoon commute, when you're working out, however it is that you listen to the Fantasy Feast Eatin podcast. Love the iTunes rankings and comments. Those are huge, dudes. Huge. I think we're done here. I'm stuffed.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Feast podcast. Make sure to also subscribe to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and the College Draft Podcast. All available on iTunes, at rosstucker.com, or wherever podcasts can be found.